Legco election delayed by 1 year. Another 121 COVID cases confirmed as more clusters emerge. And Trump backpedals on demand to postpone presidential election.
Good evening and welcome. In a highly anticipated move, Chief Executive Carrie Lam has announced the postponement of the Legislative Council elections by 1 year to September 5th, 2021. She cited the worsening coronavirus outbreak for the decision as the main reason for that decision.
The government is invoking an emergency ordinance and delaying the elections. The deferral has been welcomed by Beijing.
The Executive Council has made a decision to postpone the election by 1 year. The first consideration is, of course, public health for the 3 million plus voters or voters stranded overseas, including the one who wrote to me that voter is stranded on the mainland. The voter said that if I proceeded with the election, then the voter may seek judicial review. Postponing the elections could reduce the risk of infection and also relieve the pressure on the public hospital systems. We could avoid disrupting the legislative council cycle and the election cycle, and also it will avoid invoking the wrong ordinances, which may lead to legal challenge and therefore more uncertainties.
Well, meanwhile, the pro-democracy bloc is denouncing the election delay, saying it will uproot the constitutional basis of Hong Kong.
Meanwhile, in Beijing, the National People's Congress Standing Committee will meet again next Saturday, where it is expected to discuss arrangements for the SAR to avoid a legislative vacuum. Haley Zhou has more.
Opposing the national security law is framed as not supporting, promoting, and embracing the basic law. Beyond any doubt, it's the most scandalous election fraud ever in Hong Kong history.
Facing an uphill battle following a mass disqualification of its candidates, the city's pro-democracy camp filled in more candidates before the nomination period closed at 5 p.m. Among them, for the legal sector, Bar Association Chairman Philip Dykes is running as a backup for incumbent Dennis Kwok. But today, the pro-democracy bloc, which has won the popular vote in every legislative election since the handover, has been dealt another blow, a year's delay of the election. Pan-Democrats denounced it as an attempt to cling on to power, which could cause a complete collapse of the city's constitutional system. The pro-Beijing bloc has been calling for the delay, saying those who moved to the Greater Bay Area wouldn't be able to come back to vote because of the pandemic. In Beijing, the NPC Standing Committee will convene a 3-day meeting next Saturday. The state-run Xinhua News Agency reported Hong Kong-related items were not on the agenda, but it could be slipped in, as Executive Councillor Ronnie Tong says.
Provisional legislature is something which has to be dealt with as a constitutional issue, and therefore would again fall within the purview of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress.
The Pan-Democrats say they may challenge the legality of the poll delay in court, but for any decisions made by Beijing, a judicial review will make little difference. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
To news about the local COVID situation, the city reported 121 new coronavirus cases today, bringing the total number of infections to 3,272.
Meanwhile, 2 more patients have also died from COVID-19, raising the local death toll to 27. They're both residents of virus-hit elderly care homes. Sharon Tang reports.
For the 10th day in a row, infection numbers here in Hong Kong surpassed 100. Among the 118 local cases today, 62 are linked to earlier infected clusters. 2 more staff from Metro Broadcast Corporation have come down with the virus. So far, 8 employees of the radio station have tested positive. 1 more member of staff at Kin Shing Leung's general contractors and a cleaner in charge of sanitizing the office's toilets have been infected. The other cases stem from elderly care homes in Fanling, Sai Ying Pun and Tuen Mun. A company on Argyle Street which sells imported goods, Star Global, has become the latest cluster to emerge. On top of 2 staff members earlier infected, 4 more tested positive for the virus today, while 5 others initially tested positive.
It is a company selling red wine and cosmetic products. It's located on the basement level. Trainings would be given to the personnel, and also they would meet customers there. It can accommodate more than 100 people, so we are worried about the infection risk.
She added the office has been disinfected and is now closed. Meanwhile, there are again patients admitted to hospitals without showing COVID-related symptoms who later came down with the virus. Stressing testing capacity has already peaked, the hospital authority insists tests will not be done for everyone coming into hospitals.
We are testing thousands of samples every day, and sometimes as high as 6,000 per day. If we test every incoming patient regardless of their symptoms and their risk factors, it would really hindering the access to the patients who genuinely need testing.
Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Well, workers were happy to be back at restaurants for breakfast and lunch after the daytime ban on dining in was removed.
But as Dong Yao Nie reports, restaurants are scrambling to grapple with the change.
Rain poured down on the city during lunch hours. Luckily, people could avoid eating outside with soaked clothes as restaurants restored dine-in services. That's after the government made a U-turn to cancel an all-out dining ban for eateries, just 2 days after it imposed the rule, following objections from both health experts and residents. Customers are now allowed to eat at restaurants between 5 a.m. and 6 p.m. Many diners welcomed the change.
We are quite happy because we can take a very delicious dish.
Some say it's better that authorities corrected their mistake rather than sticking to a wrong policy.
I understood. Government didn't know what the wrong, what the correct. Government will be improved in the future.
But the sudden reversal is leaving eateries flat-footed, as many had scaled back their manpower or even closed their stores to cut spending amid the prior restrictions.
Yeah, best business our business a lot, like our staff was food preparation and frontline operation.
He compared the frequent policy changes on eateries to a failed surgery by a quack, saying authorities are making cuts in wrong places, which is leaving the catering industry overwhelmed. The current rules only allow 2 people at each table, and eateries can only run at half capacity.
The owner said they didn't have enough time to order ingredients and had to transfer materials between branches. But he knows some smaller restaurants which don't have enough resources and have to remain shut for a couple more days. Dong Yao Nie, TVB News.
Well, the COVID-19 death toll in the United States has topped 150,000, remaining the highest in the world. Over the past week, the average number of virus deaths per day in the U.S. has climbed by more than 25%. On Thursday, Florida broke its 3rd straight single-day record with more than 250 deaths. Texas has more than 320, while California had almost 400. Meanwhile, lawmakers continue to haggle over a coronavirus rescue package in Congress. The White House offered a short-term extension of a $600 weekly unemployment benefit, which is due to expire, but the gesture was rejected by Democrats. Talks will continue into the weekend.
U.S. President Donald Trump appears to be backtracking on his startling suggestion to postpone the November presidential elections.
Well, this comes as members of both sides of the political spectrum rejected that possibility. Leslie Tang has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump is backtracking on his latest jarring statement. He now says he doesn't want to delay the November presidential election.
And no, do I want to see a date change? No, but I don't want to see a crooked election. This election will be the most rigged election in history if that happens.
This comes just hours after he raised the possibility in a tweet, pushing unsubstantiated allegations that mail-in voting due to the COVID-19 pandemic would result in fraud.
So many years I've been watching elections, and they say the projected winner or the winner of the election. I don't want to see that take place in a week after November 3rd or a month or, frankly, with litigation and everything else that can happen, years, or you never even know who won the election.
I understand the president's concern about mail-in voting, which is different than absentee voting. But never in the history of the federal elections have we ever not held an election, and we should go forward with our election.
He's made both the health fallout and the economic fallout from the coronavirus much worse than it had to be, and that's reflected in the polls. And he's running scared, and he's looking for a way out, but the Constitution does not give him a way out.
The date is always the Tuesday after the first Monday in November in an election year. It is enshrined in federal law and would require an act of Congress to change it. Leslie Tang, TVB News.
Canada's Prime Minister says he regrets granting a multi-million-dollar contract to a charity group to administer a student grant program.
Justin Trudeau testified before a parliamentary committee over his government's decision to ask WE Charity to administer the $912 million program. The charity backed out of the program this month amid a controversy over awarding the organization the entire contract, despite its close ties to the Trudeau family.
I should have recused myself, knowing the connections between my family and the perceptions around this issue. However, I did not intervene to make this recommendation happen. When the recommendation came forward from the public service, I sent it back to the public service to say, you really need to make sure that this is indeed the only organization that can deliver this program and that this is done exactly the right way, because there is going to be careful scrutiny on this.
Still ahead on tonight's news. And America's great and good. Remember John Lewis.
A man hailed as the founding father of the better United States has been laid to rest.
John Lewis was eulogized yesterday by 3 former presidents and others who urged Americans to continue the work of the civil rights icon in fighting injustice during a moment of racial reckoning. The funeral for Lewis, who played an instrumental role in passing the Voting Rights Act of 1965, came amid weeks of protests against institutionalized racism. The nation's first black president used the moment to deliver a fiery eulogy that was both deeply personal and political.
An American whose faith was tested again and again to produce a man of pure joy and unbreakable perseverance. John Robert Lewis. He, as much as anyone in our history, brought this country a little bit closer to our highest ideals.
On the same day President Donald Trump suggested delaying the November election, Obama issued a stark warning that the voting rights and equal opportunity Lewis championed were threatened by those trying to discourage people from voting. Former President George W. Bush remembered joining Lewis in Selma, Alabama for the 50th anniversary of the watershed 1965 march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
We live in a better and nobler country today because of John Lewis and his abiding faith in the power of God, in the power of democracy, and in the power of love to lift us all to a higher ground.
We always knew he worked on the side of the angels, and now he is with them.
The service was held at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, where the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. once preached. King, who was assassinated in 1968, had been a mentor to Lewis. During his final days, the longtime member of Congress issued his last call to action. In an essay published in the New York Times, he challenged the next generation to lay down the heavy burdens of hate at last.
It is so fitting on the day of his service, he leaves us our marching orders. keep moving.
Lewis died July 17th at the age of 80 after a battle with pancreatic cancer. Back locally, the government has put out ads on newspapers and on its website for a new director of broadcasting who will lead public broadcaster RTHK. This as incumbent Leung Ka-wing's 3-year term ends in August next year. The RTHK has been undergoing a management review by the government following a series of controversies related to its programs. Civil servants are looking into the public broadcaster's finances, compliance operations, as well as staffing.
A woman who strangled her grandson at a hotel in 2018 was jailed for 5 years today. Can Kwai-fong strangled the 6-year-old with a backpack strap because she thought he was mentally ill. The 55-year-old initially pleaded not guilty to manslaughter, but did so after the jury was dismissed for not reaching a consensus. The judge noted it's the grandmother, not the boy, who has mental problems, adding the child's mother shouldn't have let her take care of him. That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.